Skavak retreated to his private chamber aboard the Dominion vessel, the meeting with the High Council still replaying in his mind. His quarters were sparse by design. A sleep platform, meditation pool, and weapons wall were all he required. The assassin had never been one for personal possessions. Attachments created weaknesses, and weaknesses led to failure. He submerged himself in the nutrient-rich meditation pool, allowing his scales to absorb the rejuvenating compounds while his mind processed the mission parameters. The humans would be his 301st assignment, a milestone that would cement his legacy in Dominion history. His communication terminal pulsed with an incoming high-priority transmission. Rising from the pool, moisture sluicing off his iridescent scales, Skavak activated the secure channel. Elder Tiskvan, his longtime handler, appeared in holographic form. The Council has forwarded complete intelligence files on the human species, the Elder said without preamble. You will find them incomplete. Skavak's head crest twitched in rare surprise. Incomplete, Elder? That is unusual for a priority elimination. The humans have been difficult to study, Tiskvan admitted, mandibles clicking in frustration. Our observation drones malfunction in their presence with unusual frequency. Infiltration attempts by lesser agents have failed. What we know comes primarily from intercepted transmissions and recovered technology. Now this was interesting. Skavak scrolled through the preliminary data being transferred to his terminal. Their defenses appear primitive. Their ships are barely capable of interstellar travel. Do not underestimate them, the Elder warned, an unusual note of concern in his voice. 3 observation teams failed to return from their territory. They achieved technological leaps that defy our predictive models. The Council believes they may possess unconventional cognitive abilities. Skavak allowed himself a small gesture of confidence. No species has detected my presence in 3 centuries, Elder. Whatever unusual traits these humans possess, they will not save them. Your confidence is noted, Assassin. But consider this. We have observed humans surviving conditions that would kill any rational species. They expose themselves to extreme temperatures for recreation. They consume poisons for pleasure. They deliberately court danger in activities they call sports and exploration. The assassin's inner eyelids blinked slowly as he processed this information. Fascinating behavioral abnormalities. Perhaps a species-wide neurological disorder. Perhaps, or perhaps something we do not understand, Tiskvan replied. Your mission has 3 phases: infiltration, assessment, and elimination. The Council emphasizes the importance of the assessment phase. Before eliminating their leadership, we must understand how they think, how they fight, and most importantly, how they survive. Skavak prepared his specialized equipment with practiced precision, laying out adaptive toxins, molecular blades, and infiltration tools on his preparation table. His holographic disguise generator would need custom programming for human physiological mimicry. I have noted the Council's concerns, he said as he worked. But I suspect these humans have simply been fortunate. No species rises to prominence without attracting notice from the Dominion before now. Their isolation in an unremarkable system has been their only protection. The Elder's hologram flickered. The Council hopes you are correct. Still, caution is advised. As always, I will observe before I strike, Skavak assured him. The humans will never know I was there until their leaders begin to die. After the transmission ended, Skavak returned to studying the human files. Their physical form was unremarkable, bipedal, soft-skinned, limited sensory capacity. Yet something about the footage of them in crisis situations nagged at his professional instincts. Where other species showed predictable panic responses, humans displayed something else. A strange calm amid chaos, a tendency to move toward danger rather than away. A curious anomaly, but nothing that would save them from the Dominion's most accomplished assassin. Skavak's perfect record would remain unblemished. How wrong he would prove to be. The emergency had subsided, but Skavak's unease had not. Through the viewport of his temporary quarters aboard the rescue vessel, he watched the remains of Outpost Epsilon grow smaller as they pulled away. The station still maintained partial functionality, despite damage that should have rendered it completely inoperable. Yet another human contradiction that defied his understanding. A soft chime announced a visitor. Quickly checking his holographic disguise for imperfections, Skivak composed himself into the relaxed posture his cover identity demanded. "Enter," he called, his voice modulator perfectly replicating Belvian vocal patterns. Captain Martinez stepped in, her uniform replaced with more casual attire, though her bearing remained unmistakably military. Skivak noted the medical patches on her left arm and the slight favoring of her right leg, injuries sustained during the rescue operation. "Ambassador Tularin," she greeted him. "I wanted to personally check on you. First diplomatic mission to humans, and we nearly get you killed in a station collapse. Not exactly the welcome we had planned." Skivak offered the practiced smile he had studied from Belvian cultural archives. "I am unharmed, Captain, merely contemplating the day's events." Martinez sat across from him without waiting for an invitation, another of those curious human informalities. "Hell of a first impression we've made. I promise we're not usually fighting for our lives. Well, at least not every day." She laughed, and Skivak dutifully joined in, though the humor escaped him. In Dominion society, near-death experiences were subjects of intense privacy, not casual conversation. "I must admit, Captain, I found your response to the emergency educational," he ventured. "On Belvia, our protocol would prioritize leadership evacuation to maintain command structure." "Different philosophies," Martinez shrugged, wincing slightly at the movement. "We figure preserving lives is the whole point of having a command structure in the first place." Skivak seized the opportunity to gather intelligence. The technician who sealed the breach with his own body. Is such sacrifice common among humans? "Yoshida." Martinez's expression softened. "He's stable, thankfully. The medical team says he'll keep most of his fingers, though the frostbite was severe." She considered the question more deeply. "As for whether it's common, I'd say the willingness is common, though the need isn't, thankfully. We train for emergencies, but there's no protocol that says use your body as a plug." That was all him. This contradicted everything in Skivak's briefing materials. Dominion intelligence had classified humans as individualistic and self-preserving, like most developing species. "A remarkable individual," Skivak offered neutrally. "Maybe," Martinez replied, "but I've seen similar actions from plenty of others when the situation demanded it. I think it's just part of being human. We see someone in trouble. Something kicks in." She gestured vaguely at her chest. "Overrides the self-preservation instinct." Skivak filed this information away carefully. A species-wide trait that overrode survival instinct. The implications were disturbing. "Your questions make sense, Ambassador," Martinez continued, misinterpreting his silence. "First contact situations are always about figuring each other out. Which reminds me." She produced a small data tablet. "We've updated our cultural exchange materials with some historical examples of human emergency response. Thought it might help you understand us better." Skivak accepted the tablet, recognizing the intelligence goldmine it represented. "Most thoughtful, Captain. My people will be fascinated." After Martinez left, Skivak immediately began reviewing the files. What he found sent a chill through his specialized assassin's nervous system. Humans rushing into burning buildings to save strangers. Humans diving into turbulent waters to rescue drowning victims. Humans forming human chains to extract others from natural disasters. The behavior he had witnessed during the station emergency wasn't exceptional. It was typical. Most concerning were the psychological profiles. Humans possessed something they called empathy. The ability to share the suffering of others as though it were their own. Rather than being repulsed by others' pain, they were drawn toward it with an instinct to alleviate it. No wonder Dominion infiltration teams had failed. They had been programmed to model standard xenobiological responses: fear, self-preservation, Hierarchy enforcement. None of their behavioral algorithms could account for a species that willingly absorbed damage meant for others. Skvok stared at the viewport, where Earth was now visible as a distant blue dot. For the first time in his centuries-long career, he felt a new sensation: doubt. Dr. Katri's words about Earth's extreme environments lingered in Skvok's mind as he made his way through the station's hydroponics section. The vast chamber hummed with activity even during night cycle, automated systems maintaining precise atmospheric conditions for thousands of plant specimens. He had chosen this route specifically because it was rarely traveled at this hour. His destination: the restricted xenobiology laboratory where Dr. Yamamoto was developing the next generation of FTL technology. Tonight was merely a reconnaissance mission, mapping security protocols, identifying surveillance blind spots, and evaluating potential escape routes. Can't sleep either, Ambassador. The voice nearly caused Skvok to deploy his concealed defense mechanisms, a reflex he suppressed just in time. He turned to find Lieutenant Chen tending to a row of curious red plants, her uniform exchanged for simple work clothes stained with soil. "I find my circadian rhythm is still adjusting," he replied smoothly, cursing the encounter. The maintenance worker had been one of the heroes during a micrometeorite emergency, carrying injured crew through electrical fires despite sustaining burns himself. "Tell me about it," Chen laughed, wiping dirt from her hands. "I've been on 6 different stations, and I still can't sleep properly for the first month after transfer. The plants help, though." She gestured to the specimens she was tending. "These are tomatoes from my grandmother's farm in New Malaysia, bringing a bit of earth wherever I go." Skvok noted the unusual sentiment. Attachment to specific genetic iterations of common vegetation seemed illogical. "You maintain these personally. Does the station not have agricultural specialists?" "Oh, sure, but these are mine. Hobby, you might say." She offered him a small red fruit. "Want to try one?" "Just picked it." The assassin hesitated. His holographic disguise included functioning taste sensors that would relay flavor information, while his actual consumption system would analyze the fruit for potential toxins. Standard procedure during infiltration was to avoid ingesting native foods when possible, but declining might appear suspicious. "Thank you," he said, accepting the offering. The explosion of flavor triggered a cascade of sensory data: acidity, sweetness, complex organic compounds. His analysis suite identified 47 distinct chemical components. "Good, right?" Chen asked, pride evident in her expression. "Nothing like something you've grown yourself." "Indeed," Skvok managed, filing away the curious emotional attachment humans displayed toward self-cultivated vegetation. "So what brings you to hydroponics at this hour?" Chen asked, returning to her plants. Skvok had prepared contingencies for exactly such inquiries. "I find botanical environments conducive to thought. On Belvia, we often walk among vegetation when making important decisions." Chen nodded appreciatively. "Same for lots of humans. Something primal about connecting with growing things." She gestured toward the far end of the chamber. "The meditation garden might be more what you're looking for. Dr. Paddle designed it specifically for contemplation." "Thank you for the suggestion," Skvok replied, seizing the opportunity to continue his journey without suspicion. As he navigated through the lush vegetation, a commotion from the adjacent medical section caught his attention. His enhanced auditory sensors picked up voices, urgent but controlled. "Respiratory arrest in patient Yoshida," a clinical voice announced. "Cryogenic tissue damage more extensive than initially assessed." Skvok paused, recalling the technician who had used his body to seal a hull breach. Based on his extensive knowledge of biological systems, such injuries were invariably fatal. The human should have been permitted to expire according to logical resource allocation. Instead, he heard the medical team launch into an extraordinary effort, specialized equipment being deployed, elaborate procedures initiated, multiple doctors and nurses working in coordinated sequence. "We're not losing him," a determined voice declared. "Dr. Singh, if he recalled correctly. Activate the nanite regeneration protocol. I don't care if it's still experimental. That's authorized for emergency field testing only. Another voice objected. And what do you call this? He sacrificed himself for this station. We're giving him everything we've got. The casual way they invoked experimental technology for a single damaged individual contradicted everything Skvok understood about resource management. In Dominion medicine, treatment allocation was coldly mathematical. Resources went to the most valuable assets. Yet here, extraordinary measures were being deployed for a single maintenance technician. As Skvok continued toward his destination, he added another troubling observation to his growing file on human behavior. They refused to accept logical outcomes, defying even biological inevitability with the same irrational determination they showed in combat situations. The message from the High Council flashed with highest priority signifiers, its implications clear. Skvok was no longer just failing his mission. He was now considered compromised. In 3 centuries of service, he had never received such a designation. His quarters aboard the temporary base were Spartan but secure. He had thoroughly swept them for surveillance devices upon arrival, a habitual precaution that now seemed ironically necessary to hide from his own masters rather than his targets. Skvok meticulously prepared his neural toxin injector, the elegant device disguised as a ceremonial writing implement common among Belvian diplomats. The precision-engineered weapon contained 3 doses of a compound specifically calibrated for human physiology, capable of triggering what humans called a stroke, a cerebrovascular event that would appear natural for the victim's age and health profile. As his hands performed the familiar preparation ritual, Skvok's mind wandered to the data he had accumulated on Dr. Yamamoto. The physicist was 67 standard years old, with 2 adult offspring and 4 immature descendants, humans called grandchildren. His academic accomplishments spanned 5 decades, with the FTL breakthrough coming late in his career after years of theoretical work that other scientists had dismissed. Most troubling of all, Yamamoto was universally described in personnel records as kind, generous, and mentor to younger researchers. Like Engineer Okonkwo, he appeared to prioritize collective advancement over personal achievement, a trait the Dominion had identified as a weakness, but which increasingly seemed to function as a strength for humans. Focus on the mission, Skvok muttered to himself, an unprecedented verbal slip that revealed his disturbed mental state. He had never needed to remind himself of mission priorities before. Assassination was simply what he did, his function, his purpose, his identity. The base schematic displayed on his terminal showed Yamamoto's lab on the lower level, deliberately isolated from residential sections to minimize disruption from equipment noise. Night cycle would begin in 47 minutes, after which the physicist typically worked alone for approximately 3 hours before retiring. A perfect window for elimination. Skvok activated his holographic disguise, verified its integrity, and moved toward the door, then stopped abruptly. On his personal terminal glowed the research files he had been reviewing, the collected data on human behavior patterns. The file currently displayed contained information on a concept humans called legacy. Unlike Dominion members, who viewed themselves as temporary vessels serving the eternal collective, humans invested extraordinary significance in their individual contributions, continuing beyond their biological termination. They created art, built structures, developed theories, and most peculiarly, nurtured offspring with the explicit goal of extending their influence beyond death. Dr. Yamamoto's FTL adaptation work represented his legacy, the culmination of decades of theoretical exploration. According to his personal logs, which Skvok had accessed 3 days prior, the physicist explicitly hoped his drive modifications would bring species together in peaceful exchange and create a galaxy where my grandchildren can meet new friends instead of new enemies. The assassin closed the file with a decisive gesture. Sentiment was irrelevant. The mission parameters were clear. The High Council had determined that humanity's expansion threatened Dominion interests, and Yamamoto's work accelerated that expansion. Yet as Kavak slipped into the corridor, his toxin injector concealed in his diplomatic robes, the phrase "new friends instead of new enemies" echoed in his mind with troubling persistence. The path to Yamamoto's lab required passing through the station's memorial wall, a new addition following the Epsilon disaster. Skivak had intended to avoid it, but a security patrol forced him to alter his route. As he moved quickly past the commemorative display, his enhanced peripheral vision caught the image of Engineer Okonkwo, surrounded by messages from crew members. One message, written in a child's unsteady hand, simply read, "Thank you for saving my mom." Skivak's pace faltered, just slightly, before he continued toward his target. For the first time in 3 centuries of perfect service, the Dominion's greatest assassin felt the unfamiliar sensation of his resolve beginning to crack. The message from the High Council flashed with highest priority signifiers, its implications clear. Skivak was no longer just failing his mission. He was now considered compromised. In 3 centuries of service, he had never received such a designation. His quarters aboard the temporary base were Spartan but secure. He had thoroughly swept them for surveillance devices upon arrival, a habitual precaution that now seemed ironically necessary to hide from his own masters rather than his targets. Skvak meticulously prepared his neural toxin injector, the elegant device disguised as a ceremonial writing implement common among Belgian diplomats. The precision-engineered weapon contained 3 doses of a compound specifically calibrated for human physiology, capable of triggering what humans called a stroke, a cerebrovascular event that would appear natural for the victim's age and health profile. As his hands performed the familiar preparation ritual, Skivak's mind wandered to the data he had accumulated on Dr. Yamamoto. The physicist was 67 standard years old, with 2 adult offspring and 4 immature descendants, humans called grandchildren. His academic accomplishments spanned 5 decades, with the FTL breakthrough coming late in his career after years of theoretical work that other scientists had dismissed. Most troubling of all, Yamamoto was universally described in personnel records as kind, generous, and mentor to younger researchers. Like Engineer Okonkwo, he appeared to prioritize collective advancement over personal achievement, a trait the Dominion had identified as a weakness, but which increasingly seemed to function as a strength for humans. Focus on the mission, Skivak muttered to himself, an unprecedented verbal slip that revealed his disturbed mental state. He had never needed to remind himself of mission priorities before. Assassination was simply what he did, his function, his purpose, his identity. The base schematic displayed on his terminal showed Yamamoto's lab on the lower level, deliberately isolated from residential sections to minimize disruption from equipment noise. Night cycle would begin in 47 minutes, after which the physicist typically worked alone for approximately 3 hours before retiring. A perfect window for elimination. Skvak activated his holographic disguise, verified its integrity, and moved toward the door, then stopped abruptly. On his personal terminal glowed the research files he had been reviewing, the collected data on human behavior patterns. The file currently displayed contained information on a concept humans called legacy. Unlike Dominion members, who viewed themselves as temporary vessels serving the eternal collective, humans invested extraordinary significance in their individual contributions, continuing beyond their biological termination. They created art, built structures, developed theories, and most peculiarly, nurtured offspring with the explicit goal of extending their influence beyond death. Dr. Yamamoto's FTL adaptation work represented his legacy, the culmination of decades of theoretical exploration. According to his personal logs, which Skvak had accessed 3 days prior, the physicist explicitly hoped his drive modifications would bring species together in peaceful exchange and create a galaxy where my grandchildren can meet new friends instead of new enemies. The assassin closed the file with a decisive gesture. Sentiment was irrelevant. The mission parameters were clear. The High Council had determined that humanity's expansion threatened Dominion interests, and Yamamoto's work accelerated that expansion. Yet as Skvak slipped into the corridor, his toxin injector concealed in his diplomatic robes. The phrase "new friends instead of new enemies" echoed in his mind with troubling persistence. The path to Yamamoto's lab required passing through the station's memorial wall, a new addition following the Epsilon disaster. Skivak had intended to avoid it, but a security patrol forced him to alter his route. As he moved quickly past the commemorative display, his enhanced peripheral vision caught the image of Engineer Okonkwo, surrounded by messages from crew members. One message, written in a child's unsteady hand, simply read, "Thank you for saving my mom." Skivak's pace faltered, just slightly, before he continued toward his target. For the first time in 3 centuries of perfect service, the Dominion's greatest assassin felt the unfamiliar sensation of his resolve beginning to crack. The silence that followed Skivak's confession felt eternal. Captain Martinez studied him with an intensity that made his inner eyelids flicker nervously, a tell he would never have permitted himself before. Behind her, Security Chief Raman kept his weapon trained steadily on what he now knew was an alien assassin. "You understand why this is difficult to believe," Martinez finally said, her voice carefully neutral. "You're claiming your people sent you to kill our leadership. You decided not to. And now more assassins are coming to kill both us and you." "Correct," Skivak confirmed, remaining perfectly still. His holographic disguise had been deactivated at Raman's insistence, revealing his true form for the first time. Iridescent scales, specialized sensory appendages, and the distinctive crest of a Dominion elite. "And we should trust you because," Raman prompted, his finger steady on the trigger. Skivak had anticipated this question during the 13 minutes he had spent preparing for this revelation. "I have had 17 opportunities to eliminate Captain Martinez. 34 for Dr. Yamamoto. 21 for your chief engineer. I took none of them." The security team exchanged glances, the significance of his statement clearly registering. "He's right," Martinez said quietly. "If he wanted us dead, we would be." "With respect, Captain, that doesn't mean his warning is genuine," Raman countered. "This could be manipulation toward some other objective." Skivak admired the security chief's caution. It showed a strategic mind, exactly the kind of thinking the Dominion had not expected from humans. "A reasonable concern," he acknowledged. "I offer tangible proof of my claim." With deliberate slowness, telegraphing each movement to avoid alarming the security team, he reached toward a concealed pocket in his true form's exoskeletal plating. Raman tensed, but Martinez raised a hand, allowing the motion to continue. Skivak produced a small crystalline device, a Dominion quantum communicator, and placed it on the table between them. "This contains the encrypted transmission ordering my elimination and the dispatch of the strike team. Your systems cannot decode it, but I can access the contents." Lieutenant Choi, the communications specialist, approached cautiously. "May I scan it?" "You may," Skivak permitted. "It contains no explosive or biological components. It is merely a data storage and transmission device." As Choi ran her scanner over the crystal, Martinez leaned forward. "What changed your mind? Why turn against your own people?" The question was one Skivak had been asking himself since intercepting the transmission about the strike team. The answer still felt foreign on his specialized speech apparatus. "You helped Technician Yoshida after he sacrificed himself for the station. You risked yourself to save trapped personnel during the core breach. Engineer Okonkwo gave his life so others could live." Skivak's head crest rippled with emotion he would never have displayed among his own kind. "My people would have let them die. Efficiency dictates sacrificing the few for the collective. Basic human decency isn't that special," Martinez said, though her expression suggested she understood the significance of the observation. "To my civilization, it is revolutionary," Skivak responded. "The Dominion has existed for 10,000 years through ruthless elimination of all perceived threats and weaknesses. We believe this was the only path to survival. You have shown me an alternative I never knew existed." Raman remained skeptical. "So you had a moral awakening, And now you want to help us. Not precisely, Skivak clarified. I still do not fully understand your species. Your behaviors often seem irrational by Dominion standards, but I have determined that eliminating you would be. He searched for the appropriate human concept. Wrong. The simple word hung in the air between them. For a Dominion assassin to invoke a moral judgment independent of Council directives was unprecedented, a fundamental violation of his 3 centuries of conditioning. Lieutenant Choi looked up from her scanner. Captain, the device contains quantum encrypted data I can't access, but it's definitely sending out a locator beacon. Something is tracking it. And us. Martinez's expression hardened into resolve. How long do we have before this strike team arrives? Approximately 7 hours, Skivak replied. They are the elite of my cadre. Each has over a century of experience in elimination operations. Can they be reasoned with? Martins asked. Like you were. Skivak's inner eyelids blinked rapidly, the equivalent of a human's sad smile. No. They have not witnessed what I have. They will complete their mission or die attempting it. Martinez nodded, decision made. Lieutenant Choi, full communications blackout. Raman, initiate defense protocol Theta 9. She turned back to Skivak. You're going to tell us everything about these assassins, their tactics, technologies, and weaknesses. Every detail. I will, Skivak agreed, experiencing the strange sensation of betraying everything he had been for 3 centuries, yet feeling more aligned with his true self than ever before. Cravash moved silently through the outpost's darkened corridors, his specialized appendages absorbing ambient sound. 3 centuries of elimination operations had honed his senses to detect the slightest abnormality, and something about this mission felt wrong. The human outpost seemed too quiet, too orderly for a species reportedly chaotic and undisciplined. Section 4 clear, he subvocalized to his team through their neural link. Proceed to Phase 2 targeting. The 5-member strike team had breached the outpost's outer defenses with practiced ease. Jek had disabled the primary alarm systems, Morel had neutralized the automated defense grid, and the others had established infiltration corridors to their primary targets. By all measures, the operation was proceeding flawlessly. Yet Cravash felt the disquiet of instincts honed through countless missions. Where were the guards? The security drones? The basic defense measures any sentient species should employ. Approaching primary target zone, Jek reported. Life support center ahead. Thermal signatures indicate minimal presence. Cravash continued toward his own objective, the command center, where he would eliminate the human leadership. Skivak's betrayal had complicated their mission, but not fundamentally altered it. The Dominion's most accomplished assassin had somehow been compromised by these humans, a concerning development that made their elimination even more urgent. The first deviation from mission parameters came suddenly. Jek's neural link went silent as he entered what their intelligence indicated was the life support center. Neither follow-up reports nor emergency signals followed. Jek. Report status, Cravash demanded through the link. Only static answered. Before Cravash could redirect team resources to investigate, 2 more neural links flickered and went silent. Mril and Tfal, approaching the research laboratories and communication hub respectively. Abort standard approach, Cravash ordered the remaining team member. Implement contingency delta. Something was very wrong. The humans should not have detected their presence, let alone managed to neutralize 3 elite Dominion assassins. Cravash activated his enhanced sensory array, scanning for abnormalities in the surrounding environment. The corridor ahead remained clear, but his chemical receptors detected trace amounts of an unfamiliar compound in the air circulation. Suddenly, the corridor before him filled with blinding light, not from the ceiling fixtures, but from portable units positioned at ankle level, aimed upward to exploit the vulnerability of his species' vertical light sensitivity. Temporary blindness was a minor inconvenience for a Dominion elite. Cravash immediately switched to thermal imaging, identifying 3 human heat signatures converging on his position from concealed access panels. Primitive ambush, he sub-vocalized to himself, deploying a defensive sonic emitter designed to incapacitate human nervous systems. The expected collapse of the approaching heat signatures didn't occur. Instead, the humans continued their advance, seemingly unaffected. Sonic nullification field activated, came a voice. Captain Martinez, according to their intelligence files, your assassin friend was quite helpful in explaining your weaponry. Cravash felt something unprecedented. Surprise. Skvak had not merely failed his mission. He had actively betrayed Dominion tactical secrets. The corridor suddenly vented atmosphere, not completely, but precisely calibrated to create disorienting pressure differentials that targeted the specialized balance organs unique to Krozik physiology. Cravash struggled to maintain equilibrium as the humans, wearing adaptive pressure suits, continued their approach. Atmospheric manipulation is ineffective against Dominion elites, Cravash declared, activating his exoskeletal reinforcement to compensate. Your resistance is. His statement ended abruptly as the floor panel beneath him delivered a precisely calibrated electromagnetic pulse that temporarily disrupted his neural augmentations. In the momentary disorientation, something struck his primary sensory appendage, a simple projectile carrying a compound that immediately began neutralizing his specialized sensory receptors. As Cravash fought to recover, he realized the humans were not attempting to kill him. Their tactics were designed to capture, not eliminate, a concept so foreign to Dominion operation protocols that he had not considered it as a possibility. Your species relies too heavily on technological advantages, Security Chief Rahman observed, approaching with weapon raised but not fired. Once those are neutralized, you're surprisingly vulnerable. Through failing sensory systems, Cravash detected something impossible. One of the approaching figures was Skvak, moving alongside the humans with coordinated precision. Traitor, Cravash managed through his specialized speech apparatus. No, Skvak replied calmly. For the first time in 3 centuries, I am thinking for myself. The High Council chamber remained silent as Elder Mokhtal descended from his elevated platform. In 10,000 years of Dominion history, no elder had ever physically approached a foreign species in the sacred chamber. The gesture carried profound significance that even the humans, unfamiliar with Krozik customs, could sense. Skvak watched with a mixture of astonishment and pride as Captain Martinez stood her ground, maintaining eye contact with the elder despite the intimidating height difference. As Mokhtal extended his appendage in the gesture of vulnerability, Skvak felt his breath catch. No elder had offered direct contact to a non-Dominion species in recorded history. The captain's biometrics are remarkably steady, Dr. Singh whispered to Skvak, the medical officer monitoring vital signs through a discreet scanner. Her stress indicators are elevated but within normal parameters for diplomatic engagement. She shows no fear, Skvak replied quietly. The elders will recognize and respect this. As Martinez carefully took Mokhtal's appendage, completing the ancient ritual of trust, murmurs rippled through the assembled Dominion officials. The moment stretched, weighted with historical significance, before the elder finally spoke. Captain Martinez of Earth, your species has accomplished something unprecedented, Mokhtal said, his specialized vocal apparatus struggling with human language concepts. You have turned our greatest weapon against us. We didn't turn Skvak against you, Martinez corrected gently. We simply showed him an alternative. Mokhtal's head crest rippled in what Skvak recognized as thoughtful consideration. Perhaps that is why you are dangerous. You offer choices where we see only necessities. The elder returned to his platform, the formal contact complete. The Dominion Council will retire to consider your proposal of alliance rather than subjugation. This deviation from standard protocol requires careful deliberation. As the elders withdrew to their private chamber, Skvak led the human delegation to the waiting area, an honor gallery lined with trophies from the Dominion's long history of conquest. He noted with approval how the humans maintained composure despite the implicit threat these displays represented. You handled that perfectly, Skivak told Martinez. The physical proximity was a test. Had you shown fear or revulsion to his appearance or scent, it would have confirmed their belief that different species cannot truly cooperate. It helped that you prepared us, Martins replied. Though I admit, the translator didn't quite capture the full impact of his pheromone communication. Dr. Yamamoto joined them, his eyes bright with excitement despite the tense diplomatic situation. The scientific exchange alone makes this worth the risk. Their quantum communication technology could revolutionize our understanding of entanglement properties. Always the scientist, Martinez smiled, though her posture remained alert, even surrounded by the trophies of their conquered enemies. Skivak appreciated her awareness. The displays are deliberately intimidating. Another test to observe your reactions. We've faced worse, Lieutenant Raman commented dryly, his security training evident in how he continually scanned the environment. At least they're talking instead of shooting. A significant evolution for the Dominion, Skivak acknowledged. 3 months ago, your species' existence was unknown to them. 2 months ago, you were designated for elimination. Today, they consider alliance. No species has ever changed status so rapidly. What do you think their decision will be? Martins asked. Skivak's inner eyelids blinked in his species' version of a contemplative gesture. The logical choice would be continued hostility. Your potential growth threatens their established dominance. But logic alone no longer guides me, and perhaps it need not guide them either. The massive doors to the council chamber reopened, signaling the elders had reached their decision with unprecedented speed. Skivak felt a peculiar sensation in his specialized cardiac system, what humans might call hope. Whatever their decision, he told the human delegation, you have already accomplished something no military force could achieve in 10,000 years. You have made the Dominion question its fundamental principles. Martinez nodded, straightening her uniform as they prepared to re-enter the chamber. That's how change begins, not with grand declarations, but with simple questions. As they walked back into the council chamber together, human and Krasik side by side, Skivak realized that his greatest mission had not been any of his 300 assassinations. It had been this: becoming the bridge between civilizations that had seemed destined for mutual destruction. The assassin too afraid to confront humanity had become the first to truly understand them. And in that understanding, he had found a purpose far greater than elimination.